Good morning, welcome to this Accountability and Performance meeting. I'm Jonathan Shepherd, Police and Crime Commissioner for Hertfordshire. I'm joined by Andy Prophet, Chief Constable, Hertfordshire Constabulary. This Accountability and Performance meeting is designed to help me fulfil my statutory duty to hold the Chief Constable to account for the work of Hertfordshire Constabulary. It is live webcast to members of the public for transparency. You're very welcome. I hope you find the meeting interesting. There's no ability to ask questions. It is on view-only mode, but will help you find the conversation the Chief Constable and I will be having this morning interesting. So we've got 4 items on today's agenda. We'll be covering rural crime. It's Rural Crime Awareness Week this week, so it sounded topical. Firearms licensing, a number of public protection matters, Clare's Law and domestic violence protection orders, and the use of out-of-court resolutions as a outcome for crime investigations. So we'll start with rural crime. As I said, it's Rural Crime Awareness Week this week, and Hertfordshire has rural communities that are affected by various crime types. And so I wanted Chief Constable just to start by asking for an update on the Constabulary's current work dealing with rural and wildlife crime.
Yes, of course. Good morning, Commissioner. Thank you very much indeed. Well, as you've rightly said, rural crime and rural communities are a huge part of policing in Hertfordshire. So at the heart of our response, we have a rural crime team. They're called the Rural Operational Support Team, ROST for short. And that's a small team of 7 dedicated officers who are the tip of the sword on our response to tackling rural crime, and they work really closely with all of our neighbourhood teams across the whole of the county, really closely with neighbouring forces, because we know a lot of rural crime crosses borders, really closely with our farming community, with our rural communities, the National Farmers Union and others, to get a really tailored response to the issues that affect our rural communities. So things like agricultural theft, things like fly tipping, poaching, hare coursing are real issues that team really lead and coordinate in partnership our response to. We have equipped that team with the specialist equipment they need. So they've got drones that they can fly to get up and above farms to spot issues or indeed track and catch offenders. Specialist camera equipment, specialist vehicles, and other capabilities that help them do what they need to do in the rural community. But as I said, at the heart of this, it's being connected to, gathering intelligence from and working with rural communities and farms that are right at the heart of it, and absolutely being connected with our neighbouring forces to get the response right.
Thank you, and I've been out with that team and seen some of the really good work that they do, and as you say, connecting to neighbourhood policing teams who also can cover rural areas, rural communities in the county. I wanted to pick up on that point around cross-border criminality, because particularly in kind of rural parts of the county, that is a common part of the issue. We've touched on it before in the context of hare coursing. And I know there was a piece of work being done to look at properties that cross county borders and the kind of right response with neighbouring forces. How's that piece of work been going?
The piece of work has been completed. There are 29 farms that cross the border of Hertfordshire into neighbouring counties. We have developed specific plans for all those properties that cross borders, so when somebody calls up from one of those areas or in one of those areas, we know, well, that borders between Hertfordshire and Essex or Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire, and we can get that coordinated response in place. So we've mapped the boundary and we get the response right now, hopefully.
Fantastic, and that was certainly one of the things that was raised by some of those farmers at some of the barn meetings we did earlier in the year, so it's great to hear that has been progressed. One of the things that we've done this year is funded the rollout of a pilot using selected DNA forensic marking kits in rural communities to help prevent and recover if stolen farm equipment, tools, that sort of thing. I know there's been a lot of work done by the rural team getting that rolled out, but how's that pilot going so far?
It's progressing well, thank you, Commissioner. You kindly allocated a sum of money which has been used to fund 200 selector DNA forensic marking kits. Effectively, this is a liquid that can be painted onto property and creates a unique identification, which means that can be subsequently, if found, traced back to the owner. It's a unique marker. About 100 of those identification kits have been deployed on farms and on property around the county, and over the course of the coming months the rest of those kits will be deployed. So that's protecting now, you know, in the region of 30 business premises in our rural communities, and we hope that, as I've alluded to, will be doubled up. It comes with signage that can be posted around those locations, identifying the property as marked, which is obviously a visible deterrent and a prevention to would-be criminals, which I think is really important. Prevention, of course, being even better than having to catch the people that then may commit crime. Really, really strong feedback from our rural communities about, you know, the use of this equipment and the reassurance it's provided. And I'm pleased to say that of the properties that we have protected so far, none of them have reported being subject to any crime to us. So it would appear to be working, and we're going to keep doing it.
That's excellent to hear it. It kind of brings me on to the next question around how is the team going to be kind of monitoring and assessing the impact of that, and there's quite a basic one there around was there any crime committed in those properties, but more broadly, is that the main measure?
That is the main measure. You know, absence is absolutely what we seek here, no crime. But we will keep talking to those farms, make sure that that they're continuing to feel reassured about it. And I think really importantly for me, you know, you and I and the rural team and communities talking about the success of it and making Hertfordshire a place where would-be criminals think, I don't want to go and operate there. There's a really effective response plan. They've got a control room who knows where all the boundary farms are. They've got high capability around, you know, vehicles and drones and police dogs. That's not the place to go and commit crime, is the message we want to really land.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I wanted to go on to fly tipping and waste crime, which is an area that can be complex in terms of where the legislation assigns responsibility between different agencies. Some will sit with policing, some will sit with local authorities, some will sit with the Environment Agency, and some challenges sometimes in those gaps in individual cases. Perhaps I could just start by asking how the constabulary deals with reports of fly tipping that come in, where they get assigned to, and which the constabulary would lead.
So the constabulary prioritises reports of fly tipping on private land, because that's where a private individual business is most seriously affected, and where fly tipping happens on public land, the local authority tends to take the lead. That said, you know, you and I have both sat in meetings where we hear the impact, you know, in terms of the operation and financially on landowners when they get sometimes, you know, industrial levels of waste tipped on their land and are paying tens of thousands of pounds then to have it removed. So we absolutely hear this has a significant impact and is a high impact crime type. We are being really proactive to get out in rural communities, help business owners protect themselves by thinking about signage and thinking about watch schemes and thinking about where those vulnerable areas on a particular farm or a particular location might be. We are having some success, so there's a couple of really pleasing recent case studies, both in East Herts district, actually, Gilston and Hunsdon, where individuals have been caught, captured and held to account for fly tipping by the police. A further 3 examples in the last 2 months where individuals have been identified through going through waste and reported to the Environment Agency for formal consideration of prosecution by the Environment Agency. There is a really strong partnership group, police, landowners, local authorities working together in the county, the Hertfordshire Fly Tipping Group, innovatively named enough, where the 10 district council areas and others work together to understand intelligence, understand the response and try try and map this out, because we know it is an issue. It continues to be an issue we're focused on. So last month in August, the constabulary had 59 calls for concerns in relation to potential fly tipping. 29 of those resulted in crimes being recorded and criminal matters being progressed. We're making progress. There's more to do.
Thank you for that update, and you're absolutely right to highlight the significant impact of it. And of course, it's one of the only crime types where the victim of crime ends up with this great amount of waste on their land that they're then responsible for getting rid of, and the cost of that. And we've got some arrangements in Hertfordshire around supporting victims of crime with that. One of the things that gets often asked by farmers is around reporting and the where do you go to report that. And you've highlighted the figures around the reports that come into the constabulary. Is the message to farmers and people in the rural community that they should have confidence reporting waste crime into policing?
Yes. And that is the answer. Yes. If you believe you're subject of a criminal fly tip, call my organisation, call the constabulary. We need to know. We may respond to that individually as an organisation, looking to take criminal prosecution. Depending on the circumstances, we may work with the Environment Agency or the council, but we absolutely want to know about it.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the kind of really kind of serious, growing kind of organised crime level waste kind of crimes. Have been a number recently in the county where lorry loads of highly processed industrial commercial waste have turned up, dumped on a farmer's field or on private land. At the heart of that, there'll be a lot of money being saved by those offenders in not getting rid of waste properly. Does the constabulary look at using things like the Proceeds of Crime Act to address those kinds of offence types?
So you're quite right, Commissioner. We're aware of the organised criminality that would appear to sit behind, or the organised practice that sits behind those larger scale fly tip operations. And that's why we work with the national agencies, the national crime bodies, the national farmers union to really map and understand the intelligence in that space. Have been and will continue to be really proactive at organised stopping of vehicles in vulnerable areas. So there's a number of operations in recent weeks where hundreds of vehicles have been stopped to find out, well, what are you doing on the roads of Hertfordshire? Is there a legitimate purpose to gather that community intelligence? I think we could do more, looking at the Proceeds of Crime Act to recycle the money we recover or the fines that are issued into more activity in that space. I think there's probably more we could do in that space.
Thank you. It'd be certainly useful to have a bit more of a look at that. Thank you. And I know this has been some proactive, really good proactive work done around that kind of proactive stopping of vehicles. I know times of the day when all the tips are closed, who's driving around with waste, all those sorts of things being done. So thank you for that update. I'm going to move on to firearms licensing, which is a regular item for these meetings. And can I ask for an update on the current backlog of renewals and applications and progress being made to improve timeliness of decision making and reduce those backlogs?
You can, Commissioner, thank you. Another really important area of business for the organisation. We've spoken to it about it a number of times in these forums, and of course it's really important to our firearms holding community out there. So only yesterday I was looking at the latest data. In terms of renewals for Hertfordshire, at its peak back in February there were just over 1,200 people waiting for a renewal of a firearms licence to be issued. Yesterday that was down to 800 in Hertfordshire, so a 33% reduction over the 5 or 6 month period. The trajectory is steadily down. I'm confident that trajectory will continue to go down, not as quickly as I would like, but the trajectory is down. We have invested, as I've said on a number of occasions, 12 or 13 additional people to drive this work forward. Those people are now focused on Hertfordshire only business. There's a new leadership team in there, a really clear plan, really active consideration of how we're using technology to assist the people and officers and staff make the right decisions. The pace continues. We are working our way through somewhere approaching 180 to 200 renewals every month. We are in a year where there is a lot of work to do because a licence is granted for a period of 5 years. So each of the 5 years there aren't the same number of licences that need to be renewed. This year is the highest of the 5-year period. There are about 8,500 licences this year that we need to work our way through. So we are making progress against the backlog in the peak year of demand. So work to do, but really good progress, Commissioner.
Thank you for that update, and we've been able to track through these meetings that kind of declining backlog figure and the increase in throughput that team's been achieving. So that's a welcome continued update. Thank you. In terms of those additional resources that you put in and are now doing kind of Hertfordshire only work, are you comfortable that is sufficient to maintain that trajectory of progress? And we've talked before around some technological improvements that you have been wanting to implement, and what's the progress towards those coming through?
Thank you. I'm happy that the additional people I put in at the moment are sufficient. I say that on the basis that I've got a team of people who literally track this day by day, week by week, so I can see the continued progress. If for some reason that progress slows, clearly I can go back and look at resourcing again, and I will. We're also obviously looking at the productivity of the people in that team to make sure that people are supported and we're keeping the work rates up. The technology is slow. We have made some tweaks to effectively an intelligent system that searches against all the things you need to check before you issue a firearms licence or renew a firearms licence, so it's brought us some efficiency, but not the efficiency perhaps that I hoped it might bring in February or March when we started talking about this. So the progress we're making at the moment is largely because of the energy, the focus and the additional people we put into processing, and if that's the way we need to continue to do it, that's what we'll do.
Thank you. We've touched before around the sort of relationship between backlog and use of temporary permits, where Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire has been quite a high in number. Are you seeing the use of temporary permits come down, presumably, as more decisions are coming through quicker?
Yeah, I don't have the latest figure on the temporary permits, and it's a really important question. I think that when we don't continue to issue temporary permits at the rate we were doing going back a period of time, but I'm not sure the temporary permits per se have come down because we've focused on the renewals and getting the business flowing through there. So it's a really important area for us to watch, and the strategy, the long-term plan, is absolutely to move away from issuing temporary permits to considering the matter as a whole and either issuing or not issuing a permit.
Thank you. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary is going to be doing a thematic inspection nationally of firearms licensing sort of over the next 9-10 months or so. Bedfordshire, Cambridge and Hertfordshire is going to be one of about 6 or 7 forces to be studied as part of that review. That's only been communicated fairly recently, I know. Could I just ask how the Constabulary is beginning to think about its preparations for that review, and are there any risks that the preparations for that being undertaken actually have an impact on the capacity around delivering?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, I had a letter, as did you, from His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary last week, indicating an intention to come somewhere between November this year and February next year and inspect how the three forces, Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Hertfordshire, deal with firearms licensing. I think broadly speaking that's to be welcome. The function of the independent inspectorate is to inspect in the public interest. This is in the public interest that we get this right, and we know we haven't had it right historically. We are planning for that team potentially landing in November. It isn't distracting from the work we do, because in many ways the plan when the team come is to show them the issues we've had, what we're doing and how we're making progress against it, and how we are not satisfied with the progress but trying to push the progress forward. And so everything from getting quicker at considering and issuing a renewal or not, to communicating back with individuals and firearms communities, to building a long-term IT platform and approach that's sustainable and makes it as efficient as possible. So we are planning for it. It isn't stopping us doing the work, and broadly speaking, it is to be welcomed. If you ask me, in an ideal world, would I rather them not come in November this year and come summertime next year? Well, from the perspective, I think we'll be in an even better position next summer. Of course, the answer is probably yes, but we are where we are, and the inspectorate is planning to come in at the end of the year.
Thank you, and we'll look at the interest around the both national and local findings on that, as you said, kind of welcome process. Thank you for that update on an important area that I know is receiving a lot of attention and progress continuing to be made, which is reassuring to hear. Thank you. I'm going to go on to public protection agenda item, particularly around Clare's Law, the domestic abuse disclosure scheme, and the use of domestic violence protection orders, which are important tools for the constabulary in keeping people safe from domestic abuse, but also putting controls and interventions around perpetrators. Perhaps if we could cover Clare's Law, the domestic abuse disclosure scheme, first. Two aspects to it: right for members of the public to ask the constabulary for information, but also a proactive duty on the constabulary to disclose where a risk is identified. And perhaps if I could ask for an update in how the constabulary is using that scheme and making disclosures.
Thank you, Commissioner. A really important area of work for any police force, and absolutely at the heart of what is important about how we keep people safe in Hertfordshire. We know 2 or 3 women, and it is women, are murdered each week by men, and domestic violence is a significant warning sign around some of the worst possible imaginable crimes. So our approach to Clare's Law, as you say, the right for an individual to ask for disclosure, or the right for us to proactively tell somebody if we believe that their relationship they're in may be of risk to them, is of paramount importance. We've invested a significant amount in this space over the last 2 years, and as a result are making a hugely more proactive use of these disclosures than we were historically. To put that into context, in 2023, the total number of right to ask disclosures was 76. In 2024, that had jumped to 335, and already this year, in 2025, we are at 304. So we will be doing more again. So we're being far more proactive and making far more disclosures on right to ask, and it's broadly speaking a mirroring position for the right to know. In 2023, there were 14 disclosures. Apologies, in 2023, there were 6 disclosures made. In 2024, 173, and so far in 2025, 130. So we are making far more use of this right, an obligation, because it keeps people safe.
Thank you very much for that update, and as you say, considerable increases there, which are welcome, and that is direct information that the constabulary has assessed. Yes. Someone needs to know about a relationship to help them make an informed decision around that. So there's real people at the end of those disclosures, aren't there, in terms of people being affected and needing to be looked after. It's a really significant increase, which is really welcome. I know that some of that again has been a question of technology around helping teams proactively gather information and do that risk assessment. How's that been helping both increase the number of disclosures, but also get to information that perhaps wasn't at the forefront of that process to make those kind of risk judgments?
Significantly, I think is the short answer to that question. So we do use technology now in this area of business as a matter of course to search across all our different systems, work across all our different partner agencies to say what is the full information intelligence picture around this individual, and is there a need to share information with an individual or disclose information that an individual's asked for. So that the technology is part of what's driving that significant increase in disclosures we're making, in addition to the focus that we're putting on it and the people we put into that area of business to get this right. So I see it as an area of business that will continue sadly to grow, but is an area of business that we will not take any risks around because it's a way of preventing the most awful and highest harm crimes imaginable.
Thank you. And I know there's also been a lot of work done with significant progress around the kind of timeliness of those disclosures as a 28-day kind of expectation around the right to ask. I know that Constabulary's made some significant improvements in getting those disclosures into that time frame. Are you confident that as the Constabulary drives up the number of disclosures, it will be possible to do that within that time frame, or is there a risk to timeliness by doing it?
There is a risk to timeliness, and you're right to say that if you go back over 2 years, we made some really significant progress at the pace of disclosures to within that 28-day period. As we've used technology more and more over the last year, and it's given more and more insight into the risk, the amount of information we have to process and therefore the timeliness of that information has fallen back slightly. So I can tell you that at the moment there are too many cases that are over 28 days for my liking. That's known to me, it's known to the Assistant Chief Constable running that area of business, it's known to the Detective Superintendent leading that area of business, and we are working flat out to get back to a position where we are comfortable with it. But of course you use the technology, it gives you an opportunity to intervene. It's just given us more work to do. And we're working our way through that backlog really in a focused and energetic way.
Thank you for that update. I want to then move on to the use of domestic violence protection notices and domestic violence protection orders, which give the Constabulary the opportunity to put kind of interim protections in place in a domestic abuse case. I know there's been quite a lot of progress around increasing the use of these powers. Can you give me an update on how that is currently sitting?
Yes, I can. So a domestic violence protection order or notice is something that an officer can apply to an individual to say desist this behaviour or there will be a consequence. We use this power far more proactively now than we have done historically. That's a result effectively of gripping the issue and making sure that our people are doing it. So over the last 2 years, we've seen month-on-month increases in their usage. So and we track this in detail every single month. So I can tell you last month in August, 34 domestic violence protection order or notices were issued. The month prior to that, there were 28. The month prior to that, there were 27. So it's really proactive. And we track the breaches as well. So that, as I say, the order tells an offender what they can and cannot do, and the breach then is something we proactively act on. So of the 34 orders issued in August, 10 of them were breached, 5 people have been arrested and taken back to the court as a result of that breach, and the other 5 people are being actively sought to be arrested and placed back before the court as a result of those breaches. And that is tracked every single day and activity driven against those individuals every single day because of the harm they potentially pose to others.
Thank you for that update. And that question around compliance and breach is an interesting one, because it kind of raises the question both around, it's a policy question for government, not for you, around is that an effective tool, but actually is also provides some reassurance around the speed with which breaches are being identified. If you've already, from the August cohort, with second week in September, we've already identified almost a third of the breaches and have acted on those. Are you as confident as you can be that the breaches that are identified are the kind of upper limit of the breaches, and that where those orders are being breached, they are being identified in a relatively timely way?
Yes, I am as confident, exactly as you say, as I can be. I know this area of business, receives real scrutiny and real attention. So not just for the breaches, but for the other individuals who haven't breached, we proactively visit those individuals. So the other 24 people, as well as the 10 that breached, are visited 3 times a month for a period of time. So we adopt that kind of supportive but preventative interest around that potential or actual offender to seek to encourage them to desist the behaviour that we want to stop. So we're really, really proactive in this space. It's a big investment of time, but it's the right thing to do because of that link that I know I've laboured, but it's worth making, because of that link between this type of behaviour and people being seriously assaulted, sexually abused, or indeed people losing their lives.
Absolutely right, and I think actually that link around orders and breaches really illustrates that point, that actually those are people who are not immediately desisted from that behaviour, sadly. And where someone is aware of an order and is concerned about a breach, your advice to a member of the public would be ring 101?
I think simply that, if you are immediately concerned about your safety, ring 999. You didn't ask me about call answering times, but 7 seconds, an answer time for 999 is going really well. If it's a more general question, there is advice available through the website, but you can call 101. Average answer time on 101 now down to about a minute and a half, so really, really strong in Hertfordshire Constabulary. And our abandon rate, which is a really good indication of whether we're answering the phone quickly enough, 3 or 4% over the last 2 or 3 months. So it's a really solid service. Use the system properly, please. But yes, we're here to help. And if you need help, 999 101 or through our website.
Thank you very, very much. And it's really positive to hear around that performance. I know there's a lot of work going through that team to ensure that the public will reach really, really quickly and get a good service. So thank you for slipping that in. That's good. I'm going to go on then to our next agenda item. Thank you for that update on out of court resolutions, which are an option for the constabulary to positively resolve crime investigations through some kind of resolution that doesn't involve going through the court and the criminal justice system, that is an appropriate outcome in many cases. Can you give me an update on how out-of-court resolutions are currently being used in Hertfordshire and how many kind of there were in the last year?
Thank you. Yes, I can. It's a really important way of dealing with some types of crime. Clearly, only the appropriate types of crime. People who are out burgling people's houses, stealing people's cars, committing serious violent crime, sexually offending others should be arrested and should be going to court. However,